Hey everyone, I am Lauren Fraunheim and I just wanted to share a video with you guys. I felt really called to share this message even though it's a little bit hard for me to share, and it's entitled Peace Begins with Me. I'm going to read it off this paper. It's a little bit long, so sorry guys, bear with me. I called a boy today for the first time in 16 years. Technically, he isn't a boy anymore, but he was the last time I talked to him. And this is the first sign in the story where there's a problem. That 16 years ago, my life stopped, but of course, I kept on living. At times, I had an amazing life filled with joyful bliss, and other times, I was acutely aware of the burden I carried. I've shared this story before in writing classes in college, and once in a speech where I passionately explained that just because Britney Spears wore provocative clothing, it didn't give her an invitation for harm. I nailed that speech. But this version of the story is by far the most healing. The version where one story ends and another begins. The type of story I hope all people with a traumatic past eventually get to create and tell. I call it the day I realized that peace begins with me. I learned recently that traumatic events hold energy like DNA, energy that can be passed down from generation to generation and from event to event. This was hard for me to grasp until I realized that I never questioned how DNA was passed on. I just accepted it. So I chose to accept and open my eyes to the possibility that this was also true about energy. Accepting this as fact created a string of events that forever changed my life and the lives of those around me. It was like a pebble being dropped into a pond, taking peace and forgiveness and touching and healing the characters in the story that as the victim, I didn't even realize were impacted. There won't be details shared in this story because the story isn't just mine. I've come to realize my story is also your story, is also her story, is also his. We're all connected, and to think that we're separate is a mistake. In this story, you will see why. Technically, in this story, I am the victim. But I'm also so much more than that. And in this story, there will be someone who makes a serious mistake. But he is also so much more than that. There will be our families, and they too are more than any one decision they made 16 years ago. But I suppose you need some substance. So there's also a boy, me, a sister, and our respected families. There's also a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a brother, and moms and dads, and every other person we've met in the last 16 years. And there's a phone call. For 16 years, I lived with a lie that the night of trauma only impacted me and him. Me, because as the victim, my power, dignity, security, and faith were irreversibly altered. I became accustomed to a fear I had never known, and for 16 years I fought it, talked about it, shared it, and advocated against the trauma I knew. I learned that most of my friends had a story similar to mine. Sometimes it was considered worse, sometimes less, but always ended in us believing the lie that somehow it was our fault. That had we made slightly different decisions, we could have prevented it or changed the outcome. That somehow we could have altered the events and come out unscathed, naive and pure as we had been prior. We all feel guilty that we didn't yell to wake everyone up, push them away, fight harder, punch, kick, anything. Wishing we had chosen differently. But what I've learned in the 16 years since is that you cannot feel guilty for how your mind chose to survive that night. You cannot feel guilty for how your mind chose to survive that night. You did the best that you could with what you had, where you were. You did the best that you could with what you had, where you were. For 16 years, I never once realized the impact this night had on everyone else involved. I thought mistakenly that if I healed, everything would be okay and life would be all right. That my healing was the only thing that truly mattered. Because I was the victim, right? When my brother got married, I had a long talk with the boy's sister, who shared with me the impact that night had on her. How she felt like she couldn't talk to me about such a large part of her life. She had essentially to act like an only child to protect me. In that moment, I realized that even though I never asked, others were altering their lives to protect me, thus creating more energy around this traumatic event. Even 16 years later, when talking with her, I realized so many different things. Like I was privy to this wisdom I had never known. I understood that by others trying to protect me, they were creating more trauma in their own lives unknowingly. That by not talking about what happened that night, I unknowingly let her live her life questioning every decision she had ever made, because her decision to have me tell my parents caused her strife, guilt, and created a culture of avoidance because she didn't want to create harm to others. I never once previously had thought about how that night had affected her, how 16 years later it was a thing. Yet here we are 16 years later, and it was still a thing. I realized in that moment that only I had the power to give peace. That if I did not reach out and forgive, this would continue to impact both our families' lives for 16 more years to come. She had an objection, though, that I feel like was so valid. It's not your responsibility to call him, she said. And I replied, you're right. But if I hold the key to peace, why wouldn't I use it? In the days leading up to the phone call, I continued with my spiritual work. I opened my mind to healing and love, choosing love over fear, and trying to attract peace so that I could find the words that would provide healing to both of us. I prayed a lot for the wisdom to build a bridge so that this event could heal and not continue on. I prayed even more the morning of, reaching out to my spiritual teachers for guidance. I prayed for a peace similar to the one I had felt at the wedding, one where I could hear and say his name without anxiety, and at peace with the entire situation, past, present, and future. When it came evening time, I was exhausted from a long day of work. I went to a friend's house and had coffee from her husband's fancy French press. It was magical. Then we went to a church meeting where we shared our love for God, prayer, love, joy, connecting, and sharing our stories. Afterwards, something told me it was time to call. I noticed this calm that I had never known before come over me. I had thought previously, what if he doesn't answer? And I was at peace with all the options. Thankfully, he did. And in his words, he saw my area code and knew it was me. I don't believe in coincidences. And after not speaking one word for 16 years, I thank God for going to bat for me on that one. The phone call was perfect, peaceful and full of wisdom. He was quite shocked, but grateful that I reached out. He said he had thought about reaching out for years, about every couple weeks, but was too scared to. In the end, it was right that I reached out. It was more healing for both of us. and I believe it was more healing for our families too. And here's where the story may become hard to understand. But when you get to a place of forgiveness, love, and hope, it may become easier for you to comprehend what happened next. Just know that it took me 16 years to choose love over fear, forgiveness over pain, and peace over anxiety. My hope for you is that by reading this or listening to this video, that you'll be able to heal a little faster and come to the place I am a little bit sooner. I'm grateful for my unspeakable, horrific tragedy that kept me up for nights and nights and nights. It made me not talk to boys for 6 months. And took me until I was 22 to have a truly trusting relationship. I'm grateful that it happened. I'm grateful that it happened to me. I'm grateful that it happened to his sister. I'm grateful that it happened to him. And here's why. I ignored my intuition that night. I ignored it 3 times with logical comebacks. Afterwards, I blamed myself fiercely for ignoring it and asked myself so many if only questions. If only I had listened to my intuition. If only I had trusted it. If only I had done this or that. When I healed and found peace within myself, I slowly started to listen to my intuition more. If I had not learned to listen and trust my intuition, I would never have met the love of my life, become the person I am today, or followed this journey to healing and self-discovery. I also would have never picked up the phone. I truly believe that his mistake made him into a better person, a more loving boyfriend, and a more genuine human being. I had nothing to do with this, of course. He did that all on his own. But I am truly grateful that he chose love and redemption over shame, guilt, and more mistakes. I believe that because of what he did one time to me, he's able to love his girlfriend more fiercely than if she was dating someone who hadn't made that mistake. I'm so profoundly grateful that he is someone he trusts enough to tell his mistakes to. I think she makes him a better man with her love. And I hope one day that I get to meet her. Thank her for loving him, even though he's made mistakes. And seeing him as I always did, a person who made a mistake once as a young boy, but who is worthy of love. I'm most grateful that she realized it 10 years quicker than I did. His sister is an amazing, amazing person. She's full of love and advocacy. She is destined to change the world with her passion and fight for those who are in situations where they don't know what to do or have the means to get out themselves. She's fed and clothed the homeless and saved a woman from being attacked in hallways or alleyways. She also was stuck for many years because I believe that when she chose to believe my story, she did so without hesitation, without loyalty to her brother, without understanding the impact that it would have on others. She simply knew what I said was true and that what happened was wrong. She was so fiercely convicted that she did what she thought was right. Since then, because of the emotional experience of the traumatic situation, I believe she struggled to trust her intuition, to believe in that voice that gives her direction, and to believe that she can change the world. She needs to know that I am forever grateful for her belief in me. And until the day that I die, I will repay her by telling her of all the potential that I see in her. Because anyone can change the world.
she can. And even in all the obstacles that night has given her, I'm grateful for the compassionate, empathetic person she has become because of it. And had this never happened, I know that she would have been a different, less loving, and passionate version of herself. And I'm grateful that that isn't the case. Peace is the most important gift you can give someone, including yourself. It takes a wisdom most of us don't try to find. But if you're quiet long enough, if you work on believing in yourself and opening your mind to the positive, it will come to you. You can change your story from a victim, where others alter the reality in order to keep you safe, to one where you can give others your joy. There is a goddess in the Hindu religion that speaks to me, even though I'm Catholic. Her name is Akhilandeshvari, and she is the goddess of never not broken. And her story is my story. It could be yours too. Akhilandeshvari cultivates her power from always being broken, from living in flux, in a different, constant self at the same time. She understands that being whole has limitations. By always changing, you cannot be limited by expectations that in your brokenness, you get to decide how you put yourself back together again. Akhilandeshvari rides on a crocodile, which represents fear. Instead of rejecting fear, she rides on it, recognizes it as a fact, but does not allow it to be a force that controls her. Instead, she controls it by being constantly changing like a spinning, multifaceted diamond. A diamond that, because it's fractured, creates more diverse beauty when light shines on it. Like Rumi said, the wound is the place where the light enters you. In our brokenness, we are more beautiful. Today is the first day where we can all learn to heal. We can all get to a place where grace is more important than mistakes, where forgiveness and communication allows us to heal our brokenness, where being aware of how your actions and events impact everyone's lives. That you have the power for peace, that you can find power in powerless situations. That if you have the power for peace, it's your responsibility to use it. That your life has so much more joy on the other side. I'm here to tell you that none of us are determined by one night. As long as each party can acknowledge the pain that was caused, apologize, and extend grace. I'm sincerely grateful for how our story turned out. That despite not having any contact with each other in 16 years, our lives were always connected in ways we could have never realized. That we thought of the situation often, and were both open to healing. That I trusted my intuition, and that he allowed himself to be loved, so that in the meantime, I could heal and come to a place where we could all put this story to rest, and instead create a new one. I told him to save my number, and I hope one day he uses it. I want our families to be free from this event. I want him to know he's forgiven and be able to breathe again. I want his sister to trust herself and start changing the world already. This world needs her passion and her light. When we all wake up tomorrow, I hope that we realize our lives are like broken pottery, put back together with gold lacquer, showing each other that because we were once broken, we are now more beautiful. Because it is in our shared brokenness that we're connected to this world, to each other, to love. So I just want to say thank you for watching this. Thank you for being a part of my journey. To anyone out there who is a victim of abuse, sexual, physical, emotional, know that you have the power
within you to change your situation. Know that you're not alone. Know that these traumatic events can change us, can be passed on, can turn into so many different ways and affect your life in so many different places that you would have never realized. If you need somebody to reach out to, message me, comment below. I would love to help you through this traumatic time, to find a place back to forgiveness, find a place of peace, and find a place where you're empowered to heal others, to share your light, and to live in joy again. All right, I'm Lauren Frauenheim, and this is the beginning of